Something about this keeps happening to you. Not once, not randomly. The same pattern, just different people. And at some point, you stopped calling it coincidence. You've asked yourself why. Why does this keep happening? Why does it feel like no matter where you go, you end up right back here? Different faces, same outcome. Here's what most people avoid hearing. It's not just them. And no, you didn't cause everything that happened to you. But you did allow something to repeat that should have ended the first time. And if that part doesn't change, nothing else will. It never starts big. It builds quietly. So quietly, you don't even notice it forming. You ignore something small because you want peace. You let something slide because you don't want conflict. You stay quiet because you don't want to be difficult. And in the moment, it feels harmless. Until it repeats. Until it feels familiar. Until one day, you realize you're back in the same cycle again. But the pattern didn't start with them. It started with what you allowed the first time. That moment you ignored your discomfort, that was the shift. Not a fight, not something dramatic, just a quiet decision to tolerate what you should have questioned. And from that moment, the pattern learned how to continue. And maybe the hardest part to admit is that some of your patterns were built for survival. Not confidence, not peace, survival. Keeping the peace became safer than telling the truth. Explaining yourself became safer than disappointing people. Over-understanding people became easier than asking, why am I the one carrying all of this? And when something becomes your survival strategy, you don't question it, you repeat it. So over time, you stop noticing the exhaustion because exhaustion became normal. And anything that becomes normal stops feeling like a warning. It starts feeling like life. And that's why change feels so uncomfortable now. Not because it's wrong, but because your nervous system learned something deeper. It learned to associate self-abandonment with safety. Let that sit for a moment. Because if that is true, then your patterns were never random. They were adaptive. They were intelligent at one point. But what keeps you alive in one chapter can quietly destroy you in the next. And this is where most people get stuck. They try to fix the pattern without understanding the identity behind it. Because the pattern is not the problem. The pattern is the symptom. The identity underneath it is what's repeated. And if you don't change that layer, you don't actually change anything. You just rearrange the same cycle in different forms. That's why it always feels familiar, even when it hurts, even when you swear you've learned. Familiar pain still feels like home to the nervous system that built it. And this is the part no one tells you. Growth doesn't feel like becoming new. It feels like losing something that once kept you safe. So when you try to change, your system resists you. Not because you're failing, but because it thinks you're abandoning safety. And that's where where the internal conflict begins. One part of you wants change, the other part of you wants survival. And until that conflict is understood, you stay in repetition. But something important happens the moment you see it clearly. You stop believing the pattern is happening to you, and you start seeing that it was happening through you. And that is where the shift begins. Because once you can see it, you can interrupt it. And interruption is where everything changes. Now, pause here mentally, because this is where most people go wrong. They try to fix everything at once. They try to explain it. They try to force change through emotion. But change doesn't come from intensity. It comes from decision. A quiet decision to no longer participate in what hurts you. And that decision does not require permission. Not from them, not from the past, not from the version of you that survived it. So listen carefully. You're not just dealing with people. You're dealing with what your boundaries have trained people to expect from you. And that is where your power actually is. Because anything learned can be unlearned. You keep explaining yourself to people who already chose not to respect you. You keep trying to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. You keep staying in situations that already showed you what they are. And then you wait for change. Change doesn't come from explanation. It comes from interruption. Disrespect doesn't survive on its own. It needs something from you. Your attention, your reaction, your presence. Take those away, and the structure collapses. But most people do the opposite. More explaining, more emotion, more access. And without realizing it, they strengthen the very thing hurting them. At some point, it stops being confusion. It becomes pattern recognition. And the moment you see the pattern, you're not trapped the same way anymore. Now everything changes. Not when you explain more, but when you respond differently. When you stop reacting automatically, stop over-explaining, and start removing access. But here's the part no one prepares you for. When you change, people don't adjust right away. They resist it. They test you. They push harder. They try to bring the old version of you back. Because the old version was predictable. And predictable is what made you easy to handle. But growth removes that predictability. And that discomfort you feel, that's not a warning. That's proof something is changing. Disrespect needs access. Remove the access, and the behavior disappears. So if this keeps happening, don't ask why it repeats. Ask why it still has access. Because one of those questions keeps you stuck. The other ends it. And the truth is, nothing changes until access does. Be honest with yourself. What are you still allowing? Because that's not the pattern anymore. That's the decision.